Brent Cassity served a 5-year sentence in federal prison after pleading guilty to fraud and money laundering charges in 2013. His sentencing was part of a series of convictions that surrounded a massive scheme that defrauded more than 97,000 customers in more than 16 U.S. states, hundreds of funeral homes, and multiple financial institutions, and caused more than $450 million in losses. Today, Cassidy shares what he learned during his imprisonment and how that experience has changed his life.
Brent Cassity, how are we, brother?
Travis Richey, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, man. Most of the individuals that are going to see this have seen your face, have heard your voice, that's for sure. You know, very much of your content goes behind prison bars, correct?
Which I love, by the way.
Man, don't we all?
Yeah.
What is the content that that you put behind there? What's it called?
Great question. So it's the show's called Nightmare Success, and it's a show about hope. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people assume that it's a prison show because, you know, 99.9% of the people that are interviewed have experienced prison. This show is really about how do you live through your nightmare? How do you survive it? How do you end up setting yourself free and becoming whatever that is once you return to society? Almost everybody I have has a story about being a survivor, and that, you know, the difference I always notice in when talking to people, this is going on its 4th season. There's a fork in the road that happens when we enter into our nightmare. One is you become a victim. You know, I can't believe this happened to me. It's so unfair. I'll never be what I wanted to be. It's the overwhelming give up.
Mm-hmm.
The other is the survivor mentality. This is horrible. This is the worst thing I've ever experienced. How will I survive? And these people start looking for ways to maybe not be what they thought it was going to be, but they step forward and become something and still make an impact. And so the people I talk to are the people who make an impact, the people who figure it out. And there's nothing easy about, and, you know, Travis, you and I both know, both through our own experiences and the experiences we talk to other people, re-entry is a hard road because when we get sentenced, you can get sentenced to 5 years, 2 years, 6 months, 25 years, but you are an ex-felon for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to learn to wear that around your neck. And it's just the extra weight that you have, but you can walk through it. You can live through it and figure it out. And that's what I love about the show is these people actually give nuggets of wisdom of how they're figuring it out. They don't have it all figured out, but they're moving forward. And I think that's such a great thing for people on the inside to hear, because it breaks the narrative. The narrative is, as we know, Travis, is that, you know, once you're convicted, you're always a bad person and you'll always go back to prison, and everybody always thinks that you should be locked up and there's no redeeming value for you, and so goodbye. And this show says no, we're not doing that. So that's what I love about it.
I love it, man. It's beautiful. I'm glad that you're able to continue to do that. 4 seasons. Congrats.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that is that when I got started, Travis, I looked up the graveyard is for podcasts is I think 3 months. So I thought, well, I know I have enough people to interview past 3 months, but I don't know if it'll make it. And I really, it came out about the same time that I wrote my book. And so I had been on radio and podcasts for, like a few weeks. And I started thinking about, maybe I should do a podcast. And I passed it by my wife, and she's, oh, Brent, she said, now you did the book, now you're going to do, but I felt like, maybe there was something there to fill a niche. And so the very first interview I did, I was like, oh man, I love this. This is a platform where stories that don't get told can be told, and there can be connections made of, oh, wow, I know Travis Richey now, and I would have never have known that story. And there's connections made of people thinking, I don't know somebody that went to prison, but I know Travis Richey's story, and I sure know a lot more than I thought I did.
Funny you mentioned the story. I think that I've now, you and I've lived this for so long publicly,
Yeah.
obviously, and both of our crimes being white collar, I think that there's I don't know, maybe what term to call it. Like it's an elevated sense of being a felon. Like, you and I didn't, fill in the blank of all sorts of ugly things that we've
Hmm.
heard about or seen. So it's a lot easier to say, oh yeah, I didn't pay taxes on 3 million bucks and kind of move on. But my story drops most people's guard.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious because on the outside, for people who, who think that they know you, like your wife's still there, she's beautiful. Your kids are around you often.
Yeah.
They seem well adjusted and thriving. Your grandkids. So when you look at like the quote unquote Instagram reel of Brent, it's hard to believe that you serve time. And so I'd be curious, when you're talking with these folks behind bars, how do you wear that scarlet letter around your neck? How do you navigate life with it? What have you learned?
Oh man, I'll tell you, the biggest thing I think I learned, and I think about this often because like whenever I interview somebody, it all kind of comes back up in your own mind, like what was I thinking? When I voluntarily surrendered, a lot of people don't get to do that. A lot of people are brought in, with shackles and the rifles drawn, and which I did get that treatment when I had to go back to my civil trial, which was a whole different way of traveling. But I voluntarily surrendered. So when I was standing at that gate, there was a lot of things that were going through my mind. One of the things I was really scared of was just the unknown because, everything I loved, everything I knew was behind me. And all the things I didn't know that I was stepping into this unknown world was in front of me. And the thing I was most scared of is, am I going to get raped, stabbed, fight, whatever that was, because you've seen all this stuff on TVs and the movies. Um, my biggest surprise and the biggest thing that I think really changed me is, within the first hour, everybody's helping me get set up, and the guy that was the Texas homeboy shot caller is my bunkmate, and he's helping clean out the locker, and he's introducing me to a guy that can help me get a job at the food warehouse. And this all happens in the first hour. And I think what opened my eyes to everything is that prison is a level playing field, and there's seniority as far as how people are, who's got the clicker or whatever. But as far as when you walk in alone,
Yeah.
and you have to. It's a primitive environment, and you know you are who you are, and you get accepted by who you are. It's not who has the most money or whatever. It's just I always say that people who have trouble getting along with people on the outside, they have problem with people getting along on the inside. If you don't have problems with people on the outside, you're probably going to do okay on the inside. Um, but the biggest thing that opened my eyes was just the perception of understanding that some of these people have some incredible stories and backgrounds of where they came from and the hard road that they were, but they're really good people. And I always want to hear this story now because I don't want that judgment to enter in just when I see somebody. I always want to hear the story because prison opened my eyes to I met a lot of really good people in prison. And I don't think I know that how could I have said that unless I experienced it?
Mhm.
I have a whole different way of looking at people.
It is a whole different way of looking at people. I think that I don't know. I call it a gift from God, to be honest, because I think it allows me, especially when I meet people in my day to day. Number one, I usually lead with that story because I want to make sure that they're going to be in our home or our friendship for the right reasons, But second to that is like I think that a lot of people in today's world are going through a lot of deep, dark waters.
Hmm.
And I think if you met 10 people, six or seven or eight of them out of 10 would be struggling with something pretty massive.
Yep.
And so I think when we start with our story, of, hey, let me tell you about my rock bottom.
Yeah.
It just allows them to just like openly go, oh my gosh, this is what I'm. And so many times, I don't know if this happened to you, so many times it turns into like this cathartic session about
So much.
topics that I'm not even
Absolutely.
familiar with, right?
Yeah.
It's
You know,
beautiful.
you bring up rock bottom because I had never experienced a rock bottom moment
Mm,
until the night that, we had already decided that I was going to plead guilty. My girls, I mean, they set me down. I had gotten into this weird rhythm and flow, Travis, because it went on for so long. It went on for 6 years fighting
yep.
this fight. You
Yeah.
get up with it and fight, you go to bed with it and fight, and that was your routine. And I was just
Yep.
in, and and I didn't even think about anything anymore different. And when my wife and my kids set me down and said, Dad, there's no way. The way that they've stacked these charges of wire fraud and mail fraud and it can 10 to 20 years, you're looking at hundreds of years, and this has all been bad. You can't go into a courtroom and think that you're going to beat all of this. And when they told me that, it was like, intervention, because I was like, yeah, you're right. We're out of money.
Yeah.
There is no, but the crazy thing about my rock bottom moment is the day before I was supposed to go down and plead guilty, we had this really sad family phone call. My kids were at our vacation home with my wife, and mom and dad were on the phone. My dad was going down to plead guilty also the next day, and my brother was on the phone with my wife. And it was more of just what's our next step? So my oldest daughter is going to college. There are all these different things, like how do we go next? This is how we're starting it. This is the guilty plea.
Yeah.
When I got off the phone that night, I know this sounds weird because I just said I went through this for 6 years. It was the first time that it hit me that I was pleading guilty. I was going to be basically convicted as a felon, and I was going to go to prison, and I had not contemplated it. I had not put it in my mind that all that was going to happen. And then I went down a really dark hole that I had never fallen into, of really feeling sorry for myself. Is that, you know, my kids have gone through this. My wife has gone through this. They don't deserve this. I'm going to be a lifelong stain for them. Do they deserve, or would it just be better if I just exited stage left and be done with this and let them go on? Because I don't know how this is ever going to unravel itself to be right. And I was drinking and by myself. So those two things combined are awful if you're talking about going and pleading guilty the next day. So don't do that. Anybody who's listening to that, don't plead guilty the next day. Be by yourself and start drinking a lot. I got out and wrote a letter, and I gave all the fatherly advice to my girls of everything that, I was proud of them. And then going forward, how my wife had been a superhero, and thanked all my friends. And I really actually wrote this letter, something that people would find absolutely not believable if they knew me, because I'm the guy, that half full guy, glass half full guy, always on the positive side. I take another drink, grab the keys to the car, and I think, I don't know if I'm going to go run into a tree or a wall, or just let the car run in the garage. And it was really something, Travis, because I was so drunk. I don't know what it was, like divine intervention. It was like I got struck by lightning. It was like, oh my God, Brent, what in the hell are you doing? What in the world, in the wildest things, this would be the very worst way that you could ever go out. This is be the worst stain you could ever leave, is to check out and giving up. And at that very moment, in my drunken stupor, I decided, regardless of what happened going forward, I was going to be a survivor in this thing. Victimhood it was out the window. And I knew going forward, there was nothing good to look at either. It was, going down to plead guilty, then getting sentenced, not knowing how long you're going to get sentenced, not knowing where you're going. But I thought, regardless of all that, I'm going to make my family proud of how I handled the situation. And maybe that's all I can do right now. And so when I was standing at the gate of Leavenworth, I had already experienced that. The standing at the gate was not my rock bottom moment. I had already went through my rock bottom moment like 2 months ago. And I had already decided, I'm standing at this gate. regardless of what happens to me, I'm going to be able to figure out how to adapt to it. So I think rock bottom moments are really fascinating to me, because a lot of people I talk to, Travis, and you know this too, have hit rock bottom moments, and you know, people who had experienced good things in life, and they find themselves at that place that they never thought they would be, and they have to make a decision: how am I staying here, or am I gonna start stepping out of it?
Yeah, 100%. How much time did you actually serve? What was your
So I had
sentence?
a 5-year sentence and ended up doing 3 years on the nose,
Okay. All in Leavenworth, or did they move you around?
all in Leavenworth. Yeah. And Leavenworth, that was a funny thing too, Travis, because you get that letter in the mail, and I thought, oh wow, Leavenworth, I've heard of that one.
Inmates remain on lockdown at the federal prison in Leavenworth. This has to do with a gun getting inside.
I mean, because you hear about Leavenworth. Sometimes we'd be watching movies, at Leavenworth, and they'd be talking about Leavenworth. So so that was scary too, the whole Leavenworth, and it was just like any other facility. It was just bad, no air conditioning, um, black mold, just terrible facility. But that's pretty much, I think, everywhere, unless you've gone to a place that's a new place that they've opened up.
It just opened up. So true. I was chatting the other week with Portia, who you know.
Oh yeah, Portia
Yeah.
Louder.
Yeah, Portia Louder. One of the things that her and I were talking about was the disparity in sentencing.
Yeah.
And, I remember I went in and my charge, unregistered securities transactions. There was a guy that I walked around. I'll never forget. I can't even put a face with him, but I can remember his bunk and what it looked like. And he looked at my charge and just like scoffed, like through my paperwork. My 2 years, which was 15 months, he got 37 years for basically the same charge. Did you see some of that, as well at
Oh
Leavenworth?
gosh, yeah, and Portia Louder is a good example. I think she got 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was real estate. I'm still
Yeah.
not quite sure what happened with her on the real
Yeah.
estate thing, but
First time, non-violent, non-repetitive.
yeah,
You just
yeah,
never
yeah.
look at it.
Yeah, the disparity is, well, I mean, clearly you see it within, you see it in the white collar stuff, drugs, somebody who had some little, but they were part of a conspiracy, and they get, 20 years or 15 years or 10 years, as opposed to somebody that gets 2 or 3. That's one of those things that, you wonder why there's so much disparity, but it really does come down to, the aggressiveness of who that prosecuting attorney is, and how much that judge wants to go along with their aggressiveness.
Yeah.
And that can be a bad combination, and you never know what you're walking into with that.
Yeah, no kidding. So how far was Leavenworth from where you were living at the time? Did you get visitation? What'd that look like for your family for those 3 years?
Well, I was very lucky. I mean, I would say I was on the extreme level. It was 4.5 hours, 4.5 hours away from where I lived in St. Louis. My wife literally came every weekend.
And mine too. Didn't we just hit the lot? We hit the lottery with that.
And I look at, the 3 daughters, we both have 3 daughters, and
Yep.
I look at what my wife served to them as in their teenage years, as such a role model of how you deal with something that seems like something you can't deal with. And it just became our new weird normal. The girls at one point were at different colleges at SMU in Arizona and whatever, and they came back and they were at the University of Missouri. So they were actually on the way. And so I would get to see them at least once a month. I got to see Julie every weekend. The great thing about that was that in prison, I saw so many guys that either by design, that they didn't want to communicate with the outside world because it made them too sad, or
Yeah.
the whole feeling of they didn't want somebody to see them in prison, or that they'd been left. Wife
Yeah.
divorces them and shows up with divorce papers and all those bad things. And I had 2 different, I knew people that had both happened to, and I felt so lucky that I didn't have that, because I felt like prison is such a dark place. but being completely unplugged, because a visit allowed you to actually straddle the fence from prison to the real world, where you could actually catch up and stay at least involved, as much as involved as you could in the outside world. And then you were just sucked back into prison. You could feel it. Sometimes you got strip searched, and that it really made you feel like you were back in. But I don't know what I would have done or how I would have done my time if I didn't have that every week to look forward to. I was part of my Wednesday was the hump day, and then we were going to see each other. And we had bad experiences on visitation too. My wife and kids were turned away 3 times when I was in prison. Totally ridiculous things, saying I didn't have enough points when clearly I did. I wouldn't have them come to visit me if I didn't. But it was one of those things where if they found something in prison that they knew that you liked, they figured out how to mess with you on that. But we got through that too, but there's all that anticipation too when you have prison visits. Are they going to make it here? You don't know. And, all those things are, there's nothing easy about visiting a person in prison. So it's tough on both sides, but I think it's well worth it once you can get together.
Oh man, the visits from Melissa came Saturdays and Sundays, and the visits are what, to your point, I mean, I couldn't have done 2 years without Melissa. You couldn't have done 3 years without Julie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just gave us, and I don't know, you and I did time about the same time, and so we didn't have these fancy tablets. And one of the things for Melissa and I that was what I consider a blessing at this point, therapeutic. We had to actually write out our thoughts, our fears, our conversations. And the flip side of that was, once we kind of digested what prison was, or was our version of prison, we started to like manifest and talk about life 2.0. What are we going to do with this? What are we going to do about this? Did you find that the same? Like, were you and Julie doing that? And
absolutely. And to be able to do that together, Travis, instead of on your own, to actually have a partner in the equation to talk about 2.0 together. Julie and I had an unusual situation, an unusual relationship, because I met her when she was 13 and I was 15. So we basically went through every life stage together. We went through the roaring 30s of, having everything and doing everything. And then we hit the nightmare together. And, Julie went back to work, and, the kids had to, the whole thing. And so figuring out how we were going to live after this together, it just strengthens everything around. And it's one of those things too. I look at my kids, I don't know what their life would have been like if, we would have had what we had, and even had more of what we had. But I'm so proud of them, from the fact that they had all that and knew nothing else than that. And then they worked through college, and they've done really well with their jobs, and they've gotten married, and it's I know that they would have been good people regardless. I know that. But this part of them that they've figured out through this has become part of them now, and I think it even creates a more interesting person for how they are confident about how they go through life.
Oh man, I think you nailed that. We didn't have our 3 girls when I was inside, and my Kennedy is my oldest daughter. We have an older son, but Kennedy's our oldest daughter. And at 9, she wants to be like, okay, so you're interviewing Brent, and I read through his book, and here's the questions I would ask. And last weekend when we were on our way into prison at 8 a.m., she's calling me, send me photos, send me videos. I want to hear the stories. And I can't tell you, Brent, like, it brings so much joy. It brings me to tears, literally, when I get inside. Like,
with me.
oh my gosh, it's so incredible. Like, to your point, I think that they're going to be good humans, mostly because they have your Julie and my Melissa. But
yeah, right, exactly.
But I get so excited thinking about how much of an impact my little Kennedy is going to have on the world. because
Yeah.
for the last 9 years, she's digested stories, opportunities, events. Maybe these people aren't this way. Maybe I should look at this situation a little bit differently. Maybe I should implore a little bit more empathy.
Yeah. And and I don't, then I've got a whole nother wave coming, now I've got grandsons,
Yeah.
they're going to be 3 years old, and Olivia's 6, 7 months old. And, how do they digest this? The thing that I find about that, when I ask that question, I answer it myself too, in the sense that I think there's two ways for us to handle, Travis, our world that we live in once we get out. One is to hide and hope that people don't know about it or ask about it, which is almost impossible. It's almost impossible because Google never goes away. It's got an incredible memory and always surfaces to the top whenever anybody wants to do that. So I think you have to make a concerted and deliberate decision. How am I going to present myself and my story to people? Because no matter what, they're going to know who I am. And what am I doing with that? Am I using that to impact something or better something or make a difference, whatever that is? And I think that if you are able to stand out in front of it, then you own it and they don't own it. You own your own story. Whereas if you, and I say this because my dad went to prison when I was 15 years old, and he handled it exactly the opposite. You would never know that my dad went to prison. He went to prison for 6 months, and we moved away from our place that I loved, that I grew up in, and we moved to a new city to get away from it.
Yep.
And then he became very successful, and we never talked about it.
Wow.
And so then it became a huge thing when we got back into a federal investigation, because they were after him because he was who he was.
Yep.
And then it manifested itself much bigger than it was before. But I live in the same place I've always lived. And people say, well, Brent, why don't you move? Why don't you get away? I can say a couple of different things. One is I've had great friends who've helped me before I was going in with jobs, and they've helped me when I came out. Secondly, if I moved to Austin, Texas, which I really love, that's where I was right when I got out of college. The next door neighbor Googles me the day they helped me move my stuff in, and the other neighbor goes, so you're right back where you are.
Yep.
So I feel like where I'm at here, and I've lived here, and I have a history here, that there's nothing to run away from. People know who I am. And as we know, Travis, when we go through what we know, the people who are with you are always going to be with you because they're your roots. The other people you thought were your friends, they were just a season that you were in, and they went away because everything that was around you went away. And that's not a bad thing to know. That's not a bad thing to learn.
Yep. Early.
Because it's reality. And some of the things, like I had Julie send me the letters that were written for me when I was getting sentenced, because whenever I was having a bad day, it kind of made me think, okay, I'm having a bad day. There was something that was going on where these people wrote these letters. So going back to, I was going back to what my point was, is that it's almost impossible to run away from what you've gone through. You have to live it and walk through it. And there's ways of doing that. But if you're willing to live in it, there's more chances that you'll get opportunities that you didn't think you were going to find.
You're spot on there. I think the opportunity, that's what's so cool. I was in last weekend talking with a group of guys, and this one gentleman, he kept asking me, and it was this roundabout. And he said, well, on the application this last time when I was out, I just barely checked the box. I barely flicked it. And I looked at him and I said, and the moment you did, all that guilt and shame just washed over you, didn't it? And he said, yeah. And so I said, well, what if we just pivot this? What if before you get to the box, what if you say to that hiring manager, hey, Brent, I'm Travis. And this is where I spent the last 36 months. And here's what I've learned about myself. And here's how I've grown. And because of my learning and my growth, this is how I think I can impact your company. But if you can't hire me because of my 36 months, I just want to move on now. You own it. It goes back to what you said.
You own it, and you just gave some. I mean, for any of these people, listen, that's kryptonite, secret sauce magic right there. Because if I was hiring somebody, because I hired a lot of different people at our company, that would really catch my attention.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, I'm not paying attention to the piece of paper. I'm paying attention to the person, and I want to know more about you because, Travis, you stepped into it and you own it, and you own it with a purpose.
Yeah.
You're not just saying, this is why I am who I am, and this is what I can do for you.
Mm-hmm. It's your original point. The victim mentality doesn't serve you in that. Don't talk about what your baby mama may have done or the judge did or the DA. Nobody, that doesn't serve you. In that moment, it's extreme accountability. And it's here's what I can bring to the table, period, end of story.
Right.
Man, it's a
Huge.
beautiful thing.
Huge. It's gigantic.
I know. I just love it.
I mean, there could be a whole series on that.
Yeah.
You know,
maybe there will be. We should look into
but
it.
you know what? I do think that if employers knew more of that,
Yeah.
There's a guy that just down the street here in Springfield, Missouri, where something incredible is going on. Seven Brews Coffee is a company that's growing all in the South. It's kind of like Starbucks.
Okay.
So there was a guy in Arkansas and a guy in Springfield, Missouri. He had Seven Brews Coffee, but they built these modular that were assembled on site. And so it was growing so fast that they couldn't keep up. They needed more labor. And so this Lee Lovell, who I've actually had on my show with the guy that actually was Justice Impacted guy, he's now the executive in the company. They decided, Lee Lovell, who owned the company, his wife said, you've always said you wanted to reach out and you wanted to help. And what about these guys that are coming out of prison for reentry? And he took a chance, and he hired Sean, and Sean ended up being an incredible logistics guy. And they ended up going from basically a company of 20 people to 290 people, and 92% of them are people who come from prison. And all they're doing is expanding and growing. But Lee Lovell got so involved in it. Now he's getting funds from the state and federally, and they're building a whole campus of these people for halfway house, for training, for all these different things that's going on right there. And I didn't even know about it. Travis, I like to, brag that I know a lot of different things that go on reentry. And it was literally, 2.5 hours, 3 hours away from me. And that's one of those things that also gives me hope that these type of things, it seems like they happen in silos. You want to build a bridge over to these things, but if something like that can happen, and it can happen in every city like that, that also gives people the chance to go in and tell their story and get hired to somewhere. And these guys are earning $40 plus an hour. So it's a real opportunity for them.
That's a real life changer.
With housing and everything else.
Yeah, that's a real life changer. I love those stories.
But what you said, Travis, what you said, those aren't everywhere. What you said is the thing that's the real life thing. If you go in and do that in a job interview, your percentage chances of talking to that person longer, you've expanded it out to, I don't know what the percentages are, but it's dramatic.
Yeah, I think it's pretty dramatic as well. I think it's rad. You've talked with a lot of folks. Do you have any insight on the reentry portion of it? Like, I think it's a mess. Like, period. I don't really know how to expand on it there. Like,
no, that's a good way to put it, Travis.
I do. It's tough. It's like going to it's like going to a doctor or a dentist that doesn't have any teeth. It's like they've never experienced it, and so as much as they might have a quote unquote checklist, it's like the deck is really stacked against a lot of people. You need all of these certain things, but you can't get all of these certain things. But then so anyways, without going into all of the minutia, What have you learned about navigating that? What's the advice for the people that are listening to this that are coming out that are anxious about it?
I think, that's, you've hit on the biggest thing that is the most misunderstood thing. And I mean, it's misunderstood by both the person getting out and the people that see the person getting out. The person getting out thinks that the hard part that they've done is they've served their time. And I can't wait to get back in, to the real world, and I'm going to get back and do this and that and whatever. And there's a good chance that you will be able to do, but you're not going to be able to do it right on day one.
Yep.
Even as much as you've planned, a lot of it is just you have to get your sea legs back and get steady, because there's it's like you're jumping into a moving car.
Yep.
Time has stood still while you're in and the world is going on. So you've got to catch up to that. And you got to give yourself a little bit of grace that you need to catch up to that. The thing, about that reentry part is there's the people who are looking at you coming out. You got to be so happy. You got to be, and yes, you're so happy about being out of prison. Absolutely. But there's also 1,000 things going on in your mind. I got to find a job, or I found a job. I hope I'm going to be good at a job. I hope they don't look at me as like I'm some prison creature. All these things. You're getting back into your family. I hope that I fit right back into the way I'm supposed to be, and I'm the dad and the husband exactly how I was. And I hope they don't see me as different. And all this you got 1,000 things that are going on in your mind, and you're also happy that you are out. But these 1,000 things that are going on in your mind, it takes a while for that to spin down, throttle back, so you can breathe. And in that time period, you're having to do all these things because you are actually back in society. People on the outside who are looking at you, they're evaluating, how is Brent? Is Brent good? Is he this? Is that? Or you feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
Reentry is because we think that the prison part is the hardest part. It is horrible. And freedom, shedding off your skin and being in a position both by mind and proximity of no freedom is horrible. But getting back in to reentry into society can be overwhelming, to the point where resources, like you're talking about, Travis, and you don't find them, or you feel like you can't find them, or that the help that you thought you were going to get isn't there. All those things can pull you back into a really dark place, and you have to believe that it's going to be okay if I keep stepping. It's a very easy arena to give up in, because there's so many barriers. They're real barriers. It's not like you're making them up. They really are there. You just have to decide to grit it and walk through and knock some things down. It reminds me of this guy that I interviewed. I actually just yesterday. His name's Amir Williams, and he did a 5-year sentence, and he went through and figured out this whole pardon thing. It was a state thing. And anyway, he got hired as a police officer in Connecticut. And he went through, you would think that would have been an incredible thing, and it was. But he went through all kinds of hazing and telling him he shouldn't be there, and notes left and all kinds of things in the police department. And he gritted through that, and he became a sergeant, and he mentors a lot of people now. But the point of my story is that even though he got that job, he was going to quit, because he didn't think that, all I want to do is work and make people proud and my parents proud and whatever. He almost quit, but he didn't, and he stayed with it and became a sergeant, and now he has an incredible story. The recidivism thing comes into this equation, because reentry, of what we just talked about, Travis, is so hard. And I say this on somebody who's been out for 8 years. Every once in a while, you get hit really hard in the stomach, and it takes your breath away. So I'm going along and I'm feeling good, and I've got this little, LLC, and so my accountant tells me I should put together this SEP so that I've got this, retirement fund. And I think, well, yeah, I should have done that. But I go and I make an appointment. And what don't I do? I always do this because it's who I am. Do the Travis Richey thing of who I am and and I didn't. And it was silly because when I got back into my car, I realized that guy's going to Google me,
Yeah.
and within seconds, he's going to know exactly who I am. And what happened? The next day he called and he said, Brent, we can't do a retirement account with you because we don't accept people with financial crimes. And it was just like everything comes back,
Yes.
I've been out for 8 years, and that feeling, it's just a feeling that no matter what you do, you've got to get back in the saddle and realize, yeah, there's certain things that just happen. And it doesn't
Yep.
mean that life's over. It doesn't mean you quit. You can have a bad day. You can have a bad day. That wasn't a great day, but you can get back into it.
And I think that's the message that I continue to impart to these people, because they look at me and they look at you and they think, whatever they do from the outside, we've got a white picket fence and you're okay, I'm okay. But the reality is every day on social media, it's some keyboard idiot warrior. Every week, it's somebody in the neighborhood. Every month, it's somebody
Right.
at my kids' schools. Every year, it's somebody with a business deal and it never goes away. Like, I think that's the message to tell these folks is like the self-worth and the self-identity that you gain while incarcerated is going to be what takes you through all of these albatross moments when you
Yeah.
get out.
And I think you just hit it right on the point, Travis. What you did to survive prison and how you adapted to it to survive, hold that confidence with you that you did that, so that when you hit these walls on the outside, you're that guy that can adapt to anything. You're that guy that can survive and adapt and step. If you keep that with you, you almost have to have a movie running in your mind that that's what's going on, because it's a lot easier to turn the movie off and shut it down and take a U-turn. And it doesn't solve anything. So
No.
just play the good movie. You went through a lot. You can get through it, because you already have. You already have gotten through a whole host of shit that you've had to live through, and that, just know that you're that person.
Man, that's a good one. What's your vision for where this goes for you?
Well, I'm 58 years old, and I have found one thing, and Travis, you and I have talked about this in the past. They didn't take our brain.
Yep.
So that's a great thing, because if they took our brain, that'd be really, really a horrible thing. And I am at the point in my life where I love doing things that I feel like I'm making a difference. I feel like I'm making an impact, and I really only want to do those things. I love doing my show. I do some consulting. I do some speaking. But I'm working on an app right now that kind of leads us back to this thing of reentry. Most people, when they get out, they can't find what they're looking for. They're just the resources. I need to find a bank that'll accept me. I need to, find this or that and whatever. And they're out there. They're almost impossible to find because the halfway house doesn't help you. And so what I'm doing, I'm working with a technology company that's here in St. Louis, and some graduate students out in Berkeley. And we're putting together this app that more or less allows you to be it's like the Amazon of reentry. So if I get out, almost everybody has a phone, maybe not a laptop, but almost everybody has a phone. This app says, okay, I'm looking, where can I open a bank account? Boom. Within your 15-mile radius, here's who will accept you as Travis Richey, Brent Cassity, ex-felon. I'm looking for this or that, whatever these things are. There's pages and pages of resources of things, but it gives you your area, and it brings those resources to you, and the contact people and the phone numbers and the websites, so that you can get to them. Now, this doesn't solve the problem of reentry.
No.
The idea is it at least puts us on a smoother path to find things so that you aren't as overwhelmed. And, you know, my hope is that because so many good people work and do things, but it's in silos, that this puts everything under one umbrella and it builds a bridge to those so that everybody can be in a place that they can find what they need. And, you know, I don't know if it'll, you know, what I'm doing it, Travis, because I like the idea of having a service that helps people through reentry. And I've got hopefully some good people that know a lot more than I do to be able to do the technology piece of it. But I know it's needed. I know from the people I talk to, one of the things that they always talk, I can't find what I'm looking for. Just can't get to things that I need. And hopefully this will help them with that. The other thing that I hope happens, and this is an aspiration, you know, you figure there's 26 million people that are, you know, ex-felons, and there's 70 million that have records. So it's a lot of people when you figure there's 330 million people in the United States. Wouldn't it be nice if we were able to put everybody under one umbrella so it could give us much more of an impact of a voice to be able to make real change, so that not everybody's just spread out everywhere, that we are speaking on certain things, these 5 or 10 things that are really important to us, so that you can go actually change things within the state legislature and the federal legislature. Who knows? But it sure worked well with AARP.
Yeah, well played. Well played. Man, I think the app's going to be incredible. That's some good news. That's some hope.
Well, and I've people like you, Travis, I feel confident too as this goes along. People like Travis, Richey, and other people I've met can help and give mentorship on, you know, how to get these things out there, because it doesn't just happen by itself.
Man, I appreciate it. I love it. Well, I hope everybody finds you. Nightmare to success on the outside and the inside. And when
Yeah,
they get out or while they're inside, you know, reach out to Brent. He's happy to have you on.
absolutely. And Travis, that's one thing that I forgot to say about this show. One thing I really has been gratifying to me is that I get phone calls from people that are getting ready to go into prison, and I get phone calls of people getting ready to go out of prison, that have left prison and have, because they have listened to the show. And to me, there is nothing more gratifying than that. And it's for us to have gone through what we went through, and to be able to, but I clearly don't have all the answers, because I have my own issues, like I just said with my retirement account. But the idea that we can at least give a nugget of something to maybe help somebody feel a little bit better, or a little bit more knowledgeable, or a little bit less stressed, makes you feel like, well, what I went through, being able to pay it forward, that's gratifying. It really is.
It makes it worth it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your content's everywhere. How many prisons?
Yeah. That's great. I love that. Love it. I tell everybody it is, too, because I'm proud of it.
Well, man, we appreciate you. We love you. We love what you're doing. And I think this is going to make a big impact. So I'm grateful you spent some time with us.
And the other thing, Travis, I want to thank you, because you actually helped me as the fledgling podcaster, my first season, and got me into the prison. So without your contact and connecting it to Megan, that would have never happened. So you're a good man.
Oh, man, I just love to pass it forward. So I think your content's invaluable. And the more that they can see and hear, the more hope we can bring into the system behind the walls, the more stories that we can give that are relatable to people that are on the outs. I think it just creates this ecosystem of empathy, and, you know, it all comes full circle for us in terms of blessings.
Amen to that.
Right on, brother. Wish you the best.
You too.